Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Lebanese security forces have fired tear gas at demonstrators in Beirut as anger following the massive explosion on Tuesday grows. Security forces confronted dozens of anti-government protesters, with many of them reportedly being wounded. Protesters gathered near Parliament where a small fire was lit and stones were thrown at officers. Shock has turned to anger in the city, where at least 154 people died and more than 5,000 were injured in the explosion, when a huge pile of ammonium nitrate abandoned in a warehouse in the port caught fire. Volunteers continue to arrive from across Lebanon and abroad to clear rubble and debris from the streets and neighbourhoods surrounding the explosion. US President Donald Trump has issued 2 executive orders that would ban any transaction with the Chinese companies that own TikTok and WeChat. The president argued the US must take aggressive action in the interests of national security. TikTok has come under fire from US lawmakers and the Trump administration over national security concerns. TikTok's parent company ByteDance faces a deadline of September the 15th, either to sell its US operations to Microsoft or another US firm, or face an outright ban. Australia is preparing for further domestic border closures as Victoria State has announced another daily record high for the number of COVID-19 infections. Officials in Queensland state announced they would close the state's border with New South Wales, the second worst hit state. This triggered a large number of vehicles queuing to cross the border into Queensland. Meanwhile, in the US, a new model from the University of Washington projects the country's death toll from the virus to climb to nearly 300,000 people by December. The US has the most deaths in the world at almost 160,000, with 4.8 million known cases. And Peru has surpassed 20,000 deaths, with the nation's healthcare system struggling to keep up. Bodies have been seen outside hospitals in some of the main regional cities near the capital Lima, as the country becomes the third most hit by the virus in Central and Southern America. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his party have won an overwhelming 2/3 majority in a parliamentary election, giving him the power to enact sweeping changes to the constitution. The re-elected president had sought a 2/3 majority in parliament to be able to restore full executive powers to the presidency, which he says are necessary to implement his agenda to make the country economically and militarily secure. In Belarus, President Alexander Lukashenko, who's been in power for 26 years, is facing an unprecedented opposition in Sunday's election from a political novice who says she only wants a clean vote. Thousands of opposition supporters clapped, cheered and chanted at a rally in the capital Minsk, defying a crackdown by the government ahead of the elections. Mr. Lukashenko earlier announced that a number of US nationals had been detained, but did not say when or why. Thousands of South Korean trainee doctors have gone on strike in Seoul to protest against a government plant to boost the number of medical students in the country. The government argues this will be necessary to fight emergencies like the coronavirus pandemic. However, protesters argue this would be a poor use of additional funding for the sector, saying they would be better spent improving the salaries of existing trainees, which would encourage them to move out of Seoul to rural areas. Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara has announced he will seek re-election in October, defying opponents who say the constitution forbids him from running again. The incumbent president has announced in March he would not be seeking a third term, but the leading party asked him to reconsider after his preferred successor, Amadou Gon Coulibaly, died in July. The first round of polling will be held on October 31st. Authorities in Mauritius have warned of an oil spill along its southeastern coast following a breach in a Panama-flagged ship carrying oil and diesel. Some experts are already calling the spill a disaster, with major risks to the environment. The large bulk carrier was carrying 200 tons of diesel and 3,800 tons of heavy oil. The leader of a Mexico-based church has been ordered to pay $90 million, nearly double his original bail, on newly expanded charges of rape, human trafficking and child pornography. The ruling virtually assures that the 51-year-old Nason Joaquim Garcia will remain in custody as he awaits trial. Garcia and the church deny any wrongdoing. And finally, with temperatures in London hitting 36 degrees, animals in the capital's main zoo were given icy treats to help them keep cool in the hot weather. The zoo's Asiatic lion pride were first up and offered an iced breakfast banquet of frozen horsehide to celebrate the upcoming World Lion Day, which will be marked on Monday. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.